Most of the Holy Paladin community is complaining about how Holy Shock's damage was more or less cut in half. And I, as a longtime Holy Paladin since Vanilla, who, mind you, spec'd Holy in Vanilla specifically to get Holy Shock in the first place, feel I must speak up about this, and believe it or not, thank Blizzard for doing the nerf. Yes, you heard that right. No, I did not say that wrong. Keep listening, I will explain. First of all, I'd like to say that the nerf is probably my fault. I've been doing whatever I can to try and get Blizzard to look at the issue of Holy Paladins having no AoE damage tools. And one of the stunts I pulled was to create a thread in the Mists of Pandaria forums whose title was, and I quote, "Nerf Holy Shock's Damage." Then I admitted that this rare Nerf Me thread was a shameless attempt to grab attention, and even though I did talk about how Holy Shock was doing way more damage than I'd expected in 5.0.4, I went on about how no AoE damage tools really hurt the gameplay experience, and in my defense, I didn't expect them to actually nerf Holy Shock's damage. Also in my defense, there's a positive aspect to this change. Here are the rough numbers for the damage before the nerf. So, when you're a Holy Paladin and you're soloing, which button are you going to click first? Holy Shock, of course. That'll deal the most damage, and it'll generate a charge of Holy Power. Only when Holy Shock is on cooldown would you ever click Denounce. And it's a general rule that you'll have Holy Shock at the top of your priority queue, so with this system, you're going to build up a lot of Holy Power if Holy Shock is more powerful than Denounce. But then the question becomes, what are you going to spend that Holy Power on? Holy Paladins have no damaging Holy Power dumps unless they sacrifice a major glyph to get Glyph of Harsh Words, which allows you to cast Word of Glory on enemies as a damage spell. So, I said it before and I'll say it again. With this system, Glyph of Harsh Words was essentially a must-have for a soloing Holy Paladin. Otherwise, all that built-up Holy Power is useless. But after the nerf, Holy Shock deals slightly less damage than Denounce. So the soloing Holy Paladin, unless he wants to deal damage while moving, will now have Denounce at the top of his priority queue. Unless Hammer of Wrath is available, in which case that'll be at the top since it hits harder. Now, think about the fact that Denounce doesn't build up Holy Power. Since your go-to ability no longer builds up Holy Power, it's no longer necessary for Holy Paladins to sacrifice a major glyph slot to get a Holy Power dump. So what was before a must-have glyph now becomes a nifty option. This is exactly what it and every other major glyph should be, an option. I figure I owe it to my viewers to try to make some pre-responses to the people who are discussing this change. A lot of the criticisms leveled against this change said that it'll take Holy much longer to solo and level, and how it killed the fun factor. Well, I've said many times that the fun factor needs to be Blizzard's top priority, but that being said, no one should have to be overpowered to have fun in this game. And Holy Shock was dealing crits over 40k unglyphed. Now imagine glyphing that to have another 20k damage. That could easily take a third off of a player's health bar, or even more. And keep in mind that Holy Shock is specifically set up so that it has a 25% chance over normal to crit. I'm sorry, but that's too much power for a healer to have. And as far as it taking a long time to solo as Holy goes, keep in mind that there are glyphs to boost Holy's damage. Getting those glyphs will allow you to speed up the solo and leveling experiences, and while you'll have to spend Dust of Disappearance to get healing glyphs when you go into a dungeon, at least the options are there to turn yourself into a mage in plate. I'd like to add that those glyphs aren't strictly speaking necessary, and Dust of Disappearance off of vendors, notwithstanding the AH, is actually pretty cheap. There's also a lot of moderates out there who are saying things like, the Holy Shock nerf was necessary, but they went too far with it. I'd like to disagree with you too, for the reasons I mentioned earlier. If Holy Shock dealt more damage than Denounce, then we'd have the Holy Power build-up issue, and a Holy Power dump would be a must-have for Holy once again. Post-nerf, Holy Shock deals ever so slightly less damage than Denounce. So in my opinion, the nerf was exactly as much as it needed to be. You're probably all thinking now that they could have compensated by buffing Denounce, and you're absolutely right. But it's worth saying that they'd still have had to nerf Holy Shock. Imagine Denounce dealing 40k crits, and you'll see why I say that. So the bottom line of all this is that a glyph went from being a must-have to being a nifty option, and that's all as the result of this nerf. So honestly, I think that the nerf actually made the Holy spec and its overall design better. Now that sounds bizarre, and probably it doesn't sound like the kind of thing you'd hear from a guy who spent 2 years of his free time making a mockumentary about paladins, and I'll admit it, but, well, this is honestly what I think. Of course, There's still the issue of Holy Paladins having no AoE damage tools. I feel very strongly that Blizzard needs to address this, and they need to do it now, before the leveling experience of Mists of Pandaria begins. I've said that my Denounce plus Seals idea was better than just making Consecration available to Holy, but that being said, making Consecration available to Holy and making sure it scales reasonably with spell power would be a fast, easy fix, and I very much believe it's necessary for the fun factor for Holy Paladins. I'm sorry to keep harping on this issue, but, well, Ghostcrawler himself said that if there's something important to us, we should keep bringing it up, so I'm doing just that. I'd also like to say that I've been trying out a protection spec since my guild needs tanks more than they need healers, and protection has a ton of multi-target damage tools and a baseline damaging holy power dump. I've soloed through the Firelands dailies with protection, and I have to say that switching back to holy to do those same dailies is painful, precisely because holy has no viable AoE damage tools. And honestly, this no AoE for holy issue doesn't sound like the kind of thing about which Blizzard should say, we'll fix this in 5.1. They should not wait that long. The fun factor in solo play should be kept first and foremost in their mind when they're going into a new continent full of quests where you kill lots of mobs and full of lots of monsters that can Zerg rush you. The soloing experience in this new continent should be fun and workable for every spec without exception. And literally every other healing spec in the game has a multi-target damage ability. Holy should too, especially at this critical stage of the expansion. So, I have said it before and I'm saying it again. Do not wait on this one, Blizzard.